Hello and welcome to this webinar by your friends at Smile. Over the past few years, universities have invested a lot of time and money into digital equivalents of your recruitment events. Now things are different. Do you stick with digital, cast it aside, do both, go hybrid? Well, today we are going to dive into how the University of Birmingham is approaching this dilemma. I'm Nathan, a co-founder at Smile, the leading website consultancy in the UK HE and FE space. We're known for our work on flagship websites with complex system integrations. We're a critical friend to our clients and support them in making informed choices for all of their digital marketing strategies. But it's not all about Smile. Today, I am joined by two fantastic guests. Lindsay Avery from the University of Birmingham, who has over 8 years of experience working in higher education, student recruitment and marketing. She's worked at both the University of Derby as a college marketing manager and the postgraduate recruitment manager at the University of Birmingham, covering home, EU and international markets for undergrad and postgrad students. One of the main focuses of Lindsay's current role is the management of both online and on-campus events. So you can see why Lindsay's here. And we really can't run a session about postgraduate marketing without including FindAUniversity. Mark Bennett, who is the Director of Audience and Editorial, joins us with some phenomenal data-led insight later in today's session. Some housekeeping before we get into things. If you've got colleagues who would benefit from this webinar, it's quite all right that they can't make it today. Everything will be available on wearesmile.com. It's exclusive access to our subscribers. And if you're not already subscribed, you can do so for free over at wearesmile.com/subscribe. But we are live today on YouTube and LinkedIn. And for those of you watching live, we're very happy to have you here. We'd love to hear from you. Say hi in the chat and ask us any questions that you have. We can throw your comments up in the stream, and we've got some time at the end for any questions that you do throw at us. So I hope you enjoy today's session. And if you do, chuck us a like below. Makes running these sessions all the more worth it. Okay, so some wonderful technical problems here. Okay, well, let's take that off stream a second. So before we get into today's session, we do need to rewind just a little bit. We need to think about a time before masks were in vogue. We need to rewind pre-pandemic, and Lindsay Avery is going to walk us through what she was doing pre-pandemic at the University of Birmingham when it comes to events. And then later on, we'll take a look at what she's doing today. So Lindsay, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'll just take you through the approaches that we had to events before the pandemic. So we had these split broadly into 3 different types of activity. We had online activity, on-campus activity, and then also we ran external activity. So in terms of online, we have our virtual open day platform, which we've worked very hard with Smile to implement. And that incorporates the following elements. So we've got the blog, we've got Ask Us a Question, and we've got events. And with the events, it's typed Q&A. So that's how it was before the pandemic. In terms of on-campus activity, we've got 2 large-scale postgrad open days. We've got Cafe Masters, Cafe PhD. We've also got campus tours as well. So great opportunities to visit campus, kind of, very similar to what other universities might offer as well. In terms of the external activity, we'd run external events such as the FindAUniversity fairs. We'd work with target prospects and also would be part of the Russell Group Roadshow. So again, lots of opportunities to get out and around the country promoting postgraduate courses. Brilliant. So then during the pandemic, that all had to change because in-person events couldn't take place anymore. So there was a bit of a mad panic about what we were going to do halfway through a recruitment cycle in terms of contacting prospective students and allowing them to ask us questions as well. So what we did is we switched from on-campus, in-person events to online only. And we worked, again, very hard with Smile and with teams across the university to implement Zoom webinars and meetings into the platform. So that was great. So that switched from just being talking heads and videos to live chats with academics and other students. And we also implemented PG live chat across the PG web pages, which allowed chat with our student ambassador teams between 10 and 4. And then we've developed that to be a chatbot outside those hours as we've progressed through the months since. And then external online events took place as well. So a lot of the in-person fairs were swapped for online events using kind of platforms like vFairs and things like that. So all recruitment activity was online only during the pandemic.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Now, before we take a peek at what Lindsay is cooking up for 2022 and beyond, I think it's worth looking at why Lindsay is shaping the University of Birmingham strategy in the way that she is. So one of the things that I really love about the UOB approach is how they listen to their prospects and use data to mine, to make those decisions. Who better to go to than leaders in that postgraduate field, FindAUniversity? This brings us really neatly on to our second guest, Mark Bennett. Mark, over to you.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Yes, so Mark Bennett here from FindAUniversity. You may be familiar with us. So we publish findermasters.com and finderphd.com. You know, two very well-established leading websites for prospective postgraduate students. And that's very much what my role is related to. So it's my job at FindAUni to make sure that everything we do is as useful as possible to our audience. And that means understanding our audience. This is an absolutely great event to be part of today. One of the things we do is we run a kind of tracker survey. We call it Postgraduate Pulse because it alliterates, and that's good. And this polls thousands, literally thousands of students every month across our whole audience. And it allows us to track attitudes, you know, interests, study intentions, etc. So, you know, we got talking to Nathan and Lindsay a little while back, and we've been running a special version of this, just looking at events, basically open days, and trying to get a sense of right now, you know, post-pandemic, well, whether I can say post-pandemic, but at a point where we're hopefully starting to feel like we're post-pandemic, you know, what do people actually want? People are familiar with virtual now, that's no longer new, but of course we know that, you know, physical open days are running very successfully as well. So what does the audience want? So I'm going to talk through some data, and it's very, very recent. So we're talking about data from September and October, so hot off the data presses, if you like, and kind of talk through what we've been seeing. So this first slide is just looking at what people say when we ask them if they're interested in different event formats. Please excuse the cats, by the way. And just to be clear on this, it's quite busy, some of these slides. So I'll try and talk you through what's on here. So we're looking at interest in physical, that's the purple, and virtual, that's the teal, okay? Across two audiences. So on the left, we've got PGT, prospective masters. On the right, we've got PGR, which is prospective PhD. And for each of those audiences, we've got 3 different segments, because this is quite important actually to think about different audiences within those study levels. So we've got UK students, so domestic students within the UK. We've also, because this is postgrad, we've got international students in the UK. So bearing in mind, we might have an audience here who are not UK nationals, but who are already in the UK, perhaps studying an undergraduate degree, and they're thinking of going on to a master's or PhD. And as you can see from this slide, their preferences are actually quite different, okay? So it is worth looking at them specifically. And then, of course, finally, we've got international students who are outside the UK. Big audience for virtual events in particular. What I want to say about this really is, first of all types of open day have really strong appeal to all PG audiences. So 2/3 or more, you know, are saying, yes, I would go to an event, virtual or physical. So there's a definite appetite for this. You know, whatever kind of event you're thinking of putting together, the audience is absolutely out there. What we don't see is a strong preference for one over the other when we ask the question this way. I'll loop back round to this at the end of my my kind of data. But, you know, there's not really a physical, slightly more popular than virtual, but there's only about 5 percentage points in it at most, okay? So I guess my kind of quick takeaway on this is, you know, interest probably comes down to practicality for individual students, whether an individual event makes sense to them. It's not the case, it seems, that specific audiences have fixed preferences. So you're not seeing that UK students are all about physical actually they're happy with virtual. You're not even seeing that international students outside the UK are all about virtual. In practical terms, they would probably struggle to come to a physical event in most cases, but they're still interested in that. Okay, so moving on then from this, thanks very much. So I guess the next thing you want to look at, all right, let's take that audience that does want to go to physical events. What do they want from those events? And again, just quickly on the different segmentation here. So here I'm looking at all PGT students in the UK and all PGR students in the UK. So not distinguishing at this point between international or domestic students at the moment, just keeping it simple. So we're really comparing study level here, PGT and PGR. Couple of things to comment on. I mean, straight away you can see, can't you, that PGR, that teal, the teal color, the teal columns there, much more interested in event content, okay? They select more things. They tick yes to more boxes, essentially, in this survey. They are much more interested in events. And in terms of the event, the content they specifically care about, it's networking opportunities, chances to meet prospective academics, prospective supervisors, really. It's networking with other students, and it's particular talks. So applications and funding, both of which make sense for this audience. You think, these are more complicated processes with more questions related to them at PhD level. PGT students seem a little bit less fussed overall, I suppose. They're not really as interested in the event content. I think perhaps for a PGT prospective masters, it's more about kind of getting a feel for a place. There's not one thing that obviously draws them. Slightly more in favor of, talks than they are of other things. So slightly more interested in, the funding and the application stuff there than other things there. I didn't segment on this slide between international in the UK and domestic in the UK, but I can say, having looked at the data, that international students tend to be a little bit more interested in careers, which again makes sense because a lot of these audiences will be thinking about, what they'll do after a master's or a PhD, perhaps applying for a post-study work visa, for example. So they might want to think about actually, what do other students tend to do once they graduate from these programs? What opportunities might be available for me? One more thing then, or another thing on physical events, we thought it'd be useful to ask actually, how far will people travel to attend one of these? So I've got some data for that too. Thank you. So, depending on where your university is, your kind of catchment for a physical event might be very different. You might be within a large metropolitan area, perhaps with several other universities around, so large local student populations. You may well be in a part of the UK where actually you're not that close to other major cities. Perhaps the transport links aren't as ideal and so on. And you may be thinking, actually, will people travel to my event? Well, what we've done here is ask people, how far you'll travel. And here I am again, I'm looking at domestic students in the UK for each study level and international students in the UK for each study level. The first thing I want to comment on here is the UK audiences. So the far left column and the second most left column, UK PGT students and UK domestic UK PhD PGR students. So for the PGT students, prospective masters, about 55% of people, so over half, say less than an hour. I'll travel less than an hour to go to an open day. Go to PhD, and it's pretty much a mirror image. 55% say, I'll travel for, an hour or more, 2 hours or more. And actually, about a quarter, about 25% at the top there, are saying, I'll travel for 3 hours or more. And this is something I want to keep kind of pointing out in the data here. PGR students are really keen on events. Okay, we saw that they cared most about content. They were actually the most interested. They cared the most about the content. They will travel the furthest. Okay, there's a real opportunity, I think, to do events for PGR. For internationals, I think it's interesting that you don't see that difference. So PGT and PGR are mostly the same, and actually, they're saying, well, we won't travel very far. We might hypothesize as to why that is. Perhaps they don't feel as comfortable, moving further away. They won't be as familiar with the UK and with traveling within it, perhaps. Could be budget and resource as well. Doesn't matter too much what the reason is, I think, at the moment. But, if you're thinking about putting an event on, a physical event, I guess the kind of shorthand would be, your audience is probably local PGT, local domestic PGT, and local international students. But you might be able to draw PGR students, domestic PGR students, from much further afield, actually, surprisingly far, I think. You've got people saying, I'll travel for 3 hours or more. That they really are making a day of it to attend one of these. Final slide coming up then, thank you, on physical. So we also asked, for those people who say, nope, I don't want to go to one of these events, we asked, well, follow-up question, okay, why not? What is it that makes you think you don't want to attend one of these? And again, here I'm just looking at students in the UK because it doesn't make much sense to look at the internationals. Most of them won't be able to, internationals outside the UK won't be able to attend one of these, unfortunately. Just looking at, domestic and international within the UK, master's level, so that's the purple again. The main reason for them, I think, what I'm seeing here is it's practicality. They don't have time, and actually they go, do you know what, stick it online. Actually, bear in mind, this is only the segment that say they won't go, but if they don't want to go to a physical, they'd probably rather just spend the time on something else, probably on a virtual event. It's not the same for prospective PhD. So very few prospective PhD are saying, I won't go to a physical because I'd rather go to a virtual. Actually, most of them, over a third, are saying, I'm not going because I'm not sure it's useful to me. And kind of thinking about what I was saying before, I think this is really important. This audience, just to keep emphasizing this audience is really interested in events. They will travel very far to go to them, and they care a lot about the content, but they are not convinced, or it seems, from this data, they are not necessarily convinced the events are going to be useful to them. So I think there's a lot we can think about there, and a lot of opportunity to really kind of double down there and perhaps think about the messaging specifically for this audience as well as the content. Okay, a couple of other quick things on this slide before I do virtual and wrap up the data. We did ask people, if there was another reason why not, and this probably doesn't surprise us. Bear in mind, postgrad audiences are older, so they are going to be more concerned perhaps about COVID. Also, caring responsibilities are important too. I was at a very busy, excellent event. I won't tell you where it was. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. At the weekend. And actually, one of the things that we run events ourselves. I'm always surprised at the people who come along. They'll bring kids. People pushing buggies and so on. Postgrad is not just fresh graduates actually. So when you're thinking about events, you've got to think about that audience too. Okay. So if I quickly have a little look at virtual, then having looked at physical before I hand back over. So same kind of questions then for virtual. This is a very busy slide. I'm sure you can get the recording afterwards, perhaps pause me here and you can, take a look at the detail. But all I really want to say about this is we ask the same questions about event content to the virtual audience. You get pretty much the same answers. So they want more or less the same things. And actually, I'm kind of thinking, maybe that wasn't a brilliantly designed question. Maybe I've, maybe there's a bit of a problem there. Although at the same time, I suppose that does tell you something. It says, well, look, if you just offer people, the similar kind of thing, similar kind of event, they say the same kind of things. And actually, as I'm kind of looking, I'm kind of teeing up here, is the opportunity with virtual to differentiate it more. I won't spend too much time on this, but essentially, similar pattern. You've got your PGRs, care more about networking, PGTs, if they care about things, it tends to be the talks, and the international, the non-UK audiences. And obviously, one of the reasons this slide is busy is because I've included the non-UK audiences. They care slightly more about careers and so on, because, as I've said, that's probably important to them. Final data slide from me is reasons not to attend virtual open days. And look, straight away, it's different, isn't it? It's not the mirror image of physical. So for the physical open days, the reason not to attend is either because you don't think it's worthwhile, or you don't have time. The reason people don't want to attend a virtual open day is because they prefer physical, overwhelmingly so, even some international audiences. And I think this is showing us you get a different answer if you ask the question differently. So when you say, do you like A and do you like B? Most people say, yeah, I like A and B. But when you look at it this way, you're getting a clear preference for physical, despite the fact that people are interested in virtual. And what I think is important here is that sense that, perhaps, as I say, virtual just isn't sufficiently differentiated. If it looks the same, they go, well, I'd rather do it physical. And we need to think about what it is that can differentiate virtual. Okay. Final slide from me before I hand over to Lindsay for some on-the-ground experience. Just a few bits I'd kind of pick out. I've really hammered this point home, but I think it's so important. There is such a lot of appetite for PGR. Just to kind of say again, this is the audience that will travel furthest, that cares the most and is most interested, but they're also the most skeptical. That audience wants to come to your event. If you can make that, you just need to, they want to be convinced it's worthwhile. They're ready. They're a warm audience there. I didn't talk much about this, but I think it's interesting that not a lot of people are selecting campus tours. I don't know why that is. It might be the way we've asked the question, or it could just be that with social media, TikTok and so on, people can get that kind of content elsewhere. People absolutely do care about being on campus. And then finally, as I say, I wonder if the opportunity when we're thinking about post-pandemic events is differentiation. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark. So now, as we move forward, we're handing back over to Lindsay. So Lindsay, I'm really interested to hear what it is that you're planning on doing now.
Yeah, of course. So I guess there's two strands to this really, because immediately after COVID, we kind of had, the last recruitment cycle where I think people were still very unsure about physical events, about coming onto campus. So there's sort of been an in-between year. Then there's been this year. So we've firmed up plans a little bit more for this year. But last year, there was lots of swapping and changing last minute. I think it was the Omicron variant, which was around Christmas last year, which was at the same time as our physical open day, which really impacted numbers, which I think knocked confidence in some of the academic staff with the numbers that came through. So last year was we were still very much adapting to this post-COVID world, which I think we find ourselves in, if that's the term that we keep using. So we've reverted to the pre-COVID recruitment strategy on the whole. So it's just been enhanced slightly, I guess, from everything that we've learned during the pandemic. So the online activity, for example, beforehand I explained, we had talking heads and a chat function. Well, now we've incorporated the Zoom functionality. So it's a lot more interactive. We have meetings, webinars. So, that's a big enhancement for that platform. In terms of the on-campus activity, the large-scale open days, they have returned. So we've got November and March, and we ran one at the weekend, and it was exceptionally busy, which was really great to see that people want to return to events. So that was great. We've got Cafe Masters and Cafe PhD coming up as well, and we will resume campus tours in the spring-summer when the weather is better as well. In terms of the external activity, this is possibly where we've seen a drop. So pre-COVID, lots of different companies were offering various different recruitment fairs, but now there just seems to be a couple of providers who are really pushing that. So we've actually just done a few FindAUniversity events and also the Russell Group Roadshow, both of which were incredibly successful. So the Russell Group Roadshow was very busy. People are really not afraid of COVID at the moment, so it seems okay. So that's kind of what we've reverted to, but it has got new little things that we've added as well.
Brilliant. And yeah, I guess I'm here to talk about what's coming down the pipe. What are those new little things? So Smile has been working with the University of Birmingham, with Lindsay, on some hefty updates and enhancements to their online postgraduate recruitment platform that we began many years ago. I think we've probably been working with Lindsay's team for some 7 years now, but we now work with Lindsay and her team on a monthly basis through our Evolve subscription, which is a professional service retainer where we continually evolve a digital proposition. And what you're about to see is a sneak peek at what we've been working on together over the last 12 months. So first up, it's online events. I imagine every university has their own version of this, but UOB has been doing this for years, kind of been quite pioneering in this space, I guess, way before COVID. And I love how niche some of these events really get. There's one for, I think it was medieval studies. It always sticks with me for some reason, literally designed for an intake of 2 people, which is really cool to see that level of personalization. And I think by creating this events platform bespoke, they've really created that point of differentiation that Mark talks about. Events can have multiple states. In the upcoming state, we integrate with their existing CRM systems to capture data and power marketing automations. But perhaps more importantly is that when events are live, there's so much information to explore. From pre-recorded videos to Zoom integrations. So we're not just sending people out to Zoom meetings, which again isn't that different from what others are doing, but now this is actually embedded inside of the platform. So you can engage with live sessions on the event page itself. There's our special brand of live Q&A with some awesome moderation tools. And there's a lot of other stuff here too, things like image galleries. But I think it's really key to pick up on the data from Mark here. It's the image galleries here are just not that important in PG circles. So it's much lower in the page hierarchy than the stuff that we would do for, say, UG audiences. And for me, this begins to show that tools that are designed primarily for UG audiences may not always scale for PG audiences. Here, the university is really showing that it understands its audience really well. The blog is a neat tool that the university has recently added into this ecosystem of tools. And for me, it really speaks again to Mark's data around PGT students. So PGT students are more bothered about the student experience than PGR is. And there's no better way of getting this understanding than reading about real experiences from real students like them. We see this a lot, but seeing this longer form content, I think, gives a greater insight into the overall experience. The longest standing element is the one that seems less relevant these days, I think. Student profiles that show the ambassadors from all different levels and courses, and they happily answer specific questions that are sent to them. And over the 7 years that we've been running this, the university has created just such a massive wealth of knowledge, but it's also able to use this to understand trends and to react in other parts of this ecosystem that we've co-created with Lindsay and her team. But for me, this is the most interesting addition to the ecosystem. So I should say that if you go and look at this system today, pg.bham.ac.uk, it looks quite different. So we've been reskinning this in line with the university's new brand components, but this is brand new. You won't see this today. This is Learn. Learn is a website that pulls together information from all of the other strands, profiles, questions, blog posts, events, and it pulls it together into bundles centered around a specific topic. Topics give prospects a brand new way into the same data. So we all know about Zoom and webinar fatigue, and so packaging up this information in new ways helps UOB to stand out and create that point of differentiation. Again, harking back to Mark's comments earlier, allows them to stand out from the crowd. It acts as a digest for the things that you're actually bothered about as a prospect. So for students that don't want to actively engage, but might be in that research and collection mode, this is for them. And I love that now, if you're, say, an applicant from the Middle East, you have a home to visit that brings 7 years worth of data together into one screen. From here, the university provides opportunities to actively reach out and further the conversation with them. So it's a really nice starting point. But it's not just been something for prospective students too. We've been enhancing a new back-end experience for the staff too. And we're taking learnings from our live events platform, Hijack, which was incredibly popular over those COVID years, and bringing those to this platform too. So not only are we making this more user-friendly, but we now understand what metrics are genuinely useful. We can track and display that more easily within the system itself. What I love, though, is that the university has kind of put aside its ego and is listening to what users want. It's delivering both on and offline experiences that are working together. The insight gained from one side powers the other. So it's this true ecosystem of tools, and I've been delighted to watch it evolve. I'm very excited to see this release soon. So with that said, I'm going to hand back to Lindsay now. Lindsay's going to talk about how her thinking was crafted in conjunction with data and influencers around her. So Lindsay, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so when we were looking at the recruitment strategy, I think it's important to bear in mind that there's a wide range of postgraduate students out there, and there isn't sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. So the in-person events very much work alongside online events, because we've got students from not only around the country but around the world wanting to come and study with us. So it was important to consider stakeholder feedback when we're pulling the recruitment plan together. So in terms of the in-person events, the main feedback from college staff is that the academics, it's a draw on their time. It's also a draw on budgets. It's a lot of manpower, financial support, and in-person support to put on an open day. And in terms of the student feedback, it's fantastic that they can see the campus and the facilities, but they want to speak with subject-specific contacts within the colleges, and they want to go to subject-specific sessions and talks. And if they don't get that, that can impact their experience. So they're the things that we consider with in-person events. For online events, arguably it's more cost effective. It's easy for us to pull together an event. You know, we could work with a colleague who says, I want to put on an event next Wednesday at 8 o'clock at night, and we can make that happen. So in terms of the ease of accessibility for both the staff running it and the students attending, it is very easy to access. For the student, they can save on travel costs, they can maybe fit it in around other commitments. Sessions are often recorded so they can go back to it. But one thing that we've done is that we do offer live events, and they are all sort of saved as past events, so you can sort of watch them on demand. We don't typically tend to stream our in-person events just because we want to keep them separate from each other. We want to differentiate between the two. Thank you. So yes, as I've mentioned, both have a place in the student recruitment strategy. So that broad audience. So you might have distance learners, part-time, recent grads, mature students. They're all going to want something different. So I think it's important that they both have a set place within the strategy. And what I've done this year is I've separated them out a little bit more. So instead of everything happening at the same time as each other, there's several weeks in between each set of activities. So for example, we had our on-campus open day this weekend just gone, and in January we'll have a virtual open week. So there's a bit of time between the two of them, there's a bit of space, which is very good for us in terms of organising, but also it means that in terms of marketing and comms, there's a nice gap for people to breathe and kind of think between the two. If they want to attend both, it might be that they went to the open day and then think of a question that they want to ask in January. So there's a nice gap between them, so they work hand in hand together. International students tend to visit the virtual events, which sort of goes without saying, really. So that's a very useful tool for the international recruitment team. But for Birmingham, as I'm sure other universities, they feel the same, a key USP is campus. It's the atmosphere, it's how everything feels, it's the facilities. It's huge investment in facilities. So again, it's really important to showcase that. And of course, it can be done through a 360, through a video, but actually it's that feel of being on campus. So for those who can make it, that's certainly key. And as Mark covered in his data as well, the radius that local students might visit campus. So that's something worth bearing in mind. So it might be that those who live close to campus will visit campus, and those who live slightly further away will prefer virtual. Those academic challenges around academic time and budgets, as mentioned. And then also there's the missed opportunity by not offering live Q&As and webinars, as they're so wide reaching. So it's really important to offer both things. So sometimes it might be that staff can't make a physical open day, but they can make a virtual open day as it fits in more around their schedule as well. So you can capture everybody's needs and expectations by offering both. So yes, so just to reiterate, everyone is different. So by having both of these elements in the recruitment strategy, so online and offline, you can offer the best of both and capture the entire market, or as much of the market as possible. So as mentioned before, we don't record open day sessions just because we want to keep them separate, want to keep the differentiation going between the two of them. But what we do is we want to constantly evolve what we're offering. So hence why we're working with Smile at the moment to keep upgrading the platform, and we will keep renewing and reviewing our recruitment activity. For example, we're doing a lot of work with the market insight team this year for feedback, and we've tweaked the open day. We'll tweak campus tours. We'll continue to tweak and take feedback on board and really give both the students and the staff what they want. I mentioned the staff there because it's also really important that staff are engaged with what you're offering. So in terms of the platform, one of the requirements one of the challenges that I set Nathan and his team was sort of the ease of use in the back end of the platform. So working with him now to set that live, which is fantastic. So hopefully that's going to make it a lot easier for staff to get involved. So there's no excuse when it comes to running an online event. As mentioned, the feedback, that'll capture the needs of the student. So we'll constantly review that. And that'll also capture any trends that might be going on as well. So, we've had, it goes on every single year, but the debate between, the printed prospectus and, the digital prospectus. And, just spent a lot of time at some physical events. Everyone had something printed on their desk because people like something to take away. So it's just making sure that you're keeping, an eye on the trends, and then, of course, trying to do something different, but also something that works for both the students and the staff who are working so hard to recruit students.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lindsay. So there we have it. I hope that you found that useful. I think there's been some incredible insight. I think most people would agree, hopefully, both from that statistical standpoint, but how that's actually being used in practice too. And here's what I've learned from talking to Lindsay and Mark for the past couple of months. There's that 50-50 split on desire for digital and physical. Choosing one feels like it's kind of cutting off 50% of your market. But also Mark's point around digital is a differentiator. And I think that's what UOB is really doing here, which is great. For me, it's not about doing something truly new. It's about how you package up what you can do already in a connected way, in a way that makes sense, in a way that forms a narrative that you want to write with your prospects. And if you're in one of those tricky, out of the way locations, the fact that PG students, there's that kind of 1 hour radius thing that Mark was talking about earlier. And I know there is more travel. So if people do travel, it's a serious investment. But the 1 hour thing, I think, is a bit of a red flag for me. So if they're not prepared to travel, then that should be a concern for you. And your digital offer should be more than just passive transactions, passing information from yourself to the student, And the third takeaway I have is a lot of PG digital just straight up sucks. Like, you might think that it's a shortcut to take UG tools and use them for PG needs, but the priorities are different. The priorities of what PG students want to see, want to talk about, very different to UG. So if you are taking UG tools and scaling it up, it probably won't work. So this is classic stuff, don't treat PG audiences by UG standards. And that concludes today's presentation. Thank you to our wonderful guests today, Lindsay and Mark. Now, before we do wrap up, let's take a look and see if we've had any comments or questions. Let's take a look. So, Lindsay, what do you think your biggest challenge will be in the next 12 months?
So I think from a student perspective, it's going to be the rising cost of living. And I think that might impact some decisions about whether people come and choose to study postgrad, or perhaps fees going up, accommodation going up. So I think that's something to watch over the next 12 months. But something interesting from a university point of view, one to watch, I think, is there doesn't seem to be a set approach for PG when speaking with colleagues for the university. So everybody seems to be doing something different. So there's a big range of activity going on. So whether that's some universities switching to completely digital, some moving to just playlists, or there seems to be a big range of things going on. I think that's really interesting in terms of what's happening in the sector and what other colleagues and other institutions are deciding to do.
So, Mark, kind of a follow-on from that. How do you feel? What do you think the data will say this time next year? Do you think that it will mirror where we are? Do you think it will change slightly in any way?
I mean, it's to answer that, but also pick up on what Lindsay was saying. I think that there is a real challenge for PG actually at the moment, and we see that. We've seen one of the questions we track is, how do you feel about cost? How do you feel about funding and so on? And we've seen a lot of, as you imagine, we don't see concern actually. We see uncertainty. So it's a very uncertain audience, and I think it's a separate topic in a way, but there are problems with the economics of postgrad study in the UK, particularly for domestic students, the way it's funded, and I don't see solutions coming over the horizon for those. In terms of the data, I think it's hard to say. I think a lot of it is about what people expect. We've got to a point now where that audience is, you've got to bear in mind that this prospective postgrad audience has studied during the pandemic in most cases, so they've had virtual, they've probably actually potentially experienced virtual events before. So, their expectations are going to be set by that. I'd like to think we might see a bit more differentiation, but I think what we need to do is we need to look at different audiences. We need to get better at that. You mentioned it yourself, Nathan. It's not about scaling up undergrad. Lindsay was saying as well. That the audiences you get at events, they're not. It's much more varied. It's not like a UCAS fair. Nothing wrong with UCAS fairs, but it's a huge, broad range of ages. And I think we need to get better at that. We've seen during the pandemic that a lot of older students became more interested. There was some data on this, HESA data. The pandemic did what the student loan 5-6 years ago couldn't do, which is it brought more working age people back into postgrad study, because of course it was easier for them to do it. And we've got to keep an eye on that diversification, what those different audiences need.
Fantastic. Well, once again, thank you very much to both of you. If you have found today's session useful, you can find more on the Smile website, and do drop us a like below. Our website is full of case studies, interviews with HE professionals, webinars, even our own HE news analysis and opinion show. Plenty for you to sink your teeth into. If you have a friend or a colleague that you think would benefit from today's session, the recording is available right now over on our website. Thanks very much. See you soon.